All right. Thank you again for attending tonight's District 4 community meeting. My name is Monica Leon, and I'm a public affairs specialist here at the Fremont Police Department. Tonight, our meeting is currently in a webinar format, and we will be utilizing the Q&A box and answering questions throughout the presentation. For all the questions we do not answer, we will have a segment at the end of the presentation to answer these. Before we get started, I would like to ask Councilmember Shao if he would like to say a few words before handing it off to Chief Washington. Councilmember?
Good evening. Welcome to District 4 community meeting. First, I would like to thank the City of Fremont, especially Fremont Police Department Chief Sean Washington, for organizing this series of community meetings covering all the districts, including our District 4. I'm sure that from this meeting, we will continue to engage in the community, try to share information, especially data from the Fremont Police Department regarding public safety and homelessness, so that we invite all the community members to work with us to continue to build a better future of Fremont. I would like also to thank Director Dan here also to answer questions regarding the city development and related issues. And I hope we can all get a lot of exchange of information and communication from this event. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Council Member. I do appreciate the opportunity. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sean Washington. I am the newly appointed police chief, although I've been on a job here for about 8 or 9 months, but I've been here for 25 years. So one of the main reasons I enjoy these type of meetings is just to get to know my community and know you all a little bit better, hear your perspectives and priorities, because it will help me develop strategies and policing priorities that are responsive to our community. So I do appreciate this opportunity. But before we get started, we have the distinct pleasure of having Director Dan Schoenholz here from Community Development. And he wanted to talk about the Home Key project, which I know is of interest to our community. And, you know, I'm not qualified to talk about it because it really is a little bit outside my expertise. My expertise has to do with the public safety component, but I wanted to turn it over to Dan and have him say a few words and give a little bit of information about this project as we move forward. And then we'll have some follow-up time to talk about the issues surrounding homelessness later in the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Chief Washington. And good evening, everybody. As Chief Washington mentioned, my name is Dan Schoenholz, and I'm the Director of Community Development for the city. And I wanted to briefly touch on the city's application for funding to the state of California for $40 million to convert the Motel 6 on Research Avenue into permanent, supportive, affordable housing. Addressing homelessness is one of our city council's highest priorities. And in the last couple of years, the city has opened a new housing navigation center in the parking lot at City Hall, and has also instituted a pilot safe parking program for those living in their vehicles. But neither of these programs provides permanent affordable housing. And that's the biggest challenge that we face in addressing homelessness: the lack of housing units that are affordable to those with extremely low incomes. During COVID, the state developed the $1.5 billion with a B dollar Home Key program as a way to quickly and cost effectively move unsheltered people into permanent affordable housing through hotel conversions and other innovative approaches. This Home Key program provides a unique opportunity to secure state funding to address homelessness in Fremont. And after reviewing proposals for 4 possible hotel conversion sites, staff recommended and the city council approved an application to the state to purchase and convert the Motel 6 site on Research Avenue fronting Interstate 680 into permanent affordable housing. The city proposes to work with a developer from Los Angeles called Shangri-La Industries that has experience with home key projects and hotel conversions. Shangri-La partners with a service provider called Step Up, which will manage the apartment complex and provide supportive services to the residents. Step Up has managed 15 similar projects across the country with great success. And Step Up has a stellar track record of a 97% retention rate, which means that for all tenants who move into Step Up housing, even those who have been homeless for some time, 97% are still in housing after 1 year. If the city's grant application is successful, the conversion of the hotel rooms into studio apartments will need to be completed within 1 year. Once residents move in, Step Up will provide several on-site property managers to oversee the apartment complex. And services provided on site will include skills and job training support, food programs, transportation assistance, substance abuse, and mental health treatment referrals. We're hoping to hear from the state within the next month or so as to whether or not our home key application has been awarded funding. And now I'd like to turn things back over to Chief Washington for any thoughts he'd like to share on the home key program before he moves on to his main presentation. So Chief, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I would, and we will talk a little bit more about homelessness and the police department's response to homelessness a little bit later in the presentation. However, projects like these, we are supportive of as a public safety tool. We have information through experience and data that really suggests that getting people off of the street is beneficial to public safety. The bulk of our calls are for individuals who are living on the street and don't have anywhere to go. And not to say we don't have calls for service at homeless shelters and things like that, but they're significantly less. The bulk of our time is spent on folks who are on the sidewalk or living in the bushes and those type of things. So I'll talk about our data that we've collected here that we hopefully we can put out to the community here in the coming days later on in the presentation. So thank you again, Dan, for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move on into the bulk of our presentation here. So with the next slide, we'll go over just the meeting itself. I'm going to talk a little bit about the transition plan that I created several months ago, and then some of those goals. I'm looking forward to sharing with the community what we've done over the last 7 or 8 months as an agency to enhance our service to all of you, supportive of your priorities, which includes our response to homeless type issues. Then we're going to talk about a crime update a little bit and then answer any questions that you might have. Next slide. So the transition plan, there were 6 major goals, which was to enhance community relationships, trust, and police legitimacy. And we have built that up over many decades. And so it is my job as the new police chief to ensure that that continues. And then we want to assess organizational effectiveness and efficiency. This is important, and we've dealt with this recently over the last couple of days, understanding that there is a regional and nationwide staffing shortage for police officers. It is a challenge right now to attract and hire police officers. So understanding that we are competing with every other agency out there, it is our challenge and duty to make adjustments that are responsive to the community's needs. So we're going to have to shuffle around resources internally to respond to some of the concerns that are out there in the community. More to come on that as well. Then we're going to conduct a comprehensive review of policies and procedures, and we've done that so far. We're going to provide better staffing, professional development and training for our employees as well. Then we're going to increase the internal communication, team building, and employee wellness, which obviously is a priority of this department to ensure that our officers are safe and well in all aspects of their lives. And then we want to build City of Fremont partnerships and support city initiatives. So if you haven't seen the transition plan, I welcome you to access it online to get more details about the initiatives that we have launched. Next slide. Okay, so we'll get into some of the crime data and statistics for 2021. And it's important to understand that this data is from 2021 unless otherwise noted. So one of the things that is a priority for us is violent crime. Violent crime is our top priority. And it's our top priority because it's your top priority. Several months ago, we sent out a community survey in which it demonstrated that violent crime and property crime is something that this community is concerned about. So starting with violent crime, our goal is to investigate and reduce shootings and gun crimes. We focus on quick apprehension to prevent additional incidents. In 2021, we made over 20 arrests of priority subjects identified by the Gun Violence Reduction Team. And again, that team was formed in direct relation to a sharp increase of shooting incidents and firearm-related arrests. As you can see, in 2021, we had 62 firearm-related arrests as compared to 2020. We had 41 shootings in 2021 as compared to 19 in 2020. So that trend was very disturbing. So we quickly formed this team utilizing internal resources to respond. And I believe that the team was successful in trying to mitigate the number of shootings that we had. You might have seen in the news, in the region and throughout the United States that gun violence right now is a major problem for all communities. Next slide. So our homicide and serious assaults. I should have started the presentation by first stating that as I talk through these statistics, I'm going to use words like, there's an increase or decrease, or, we have a relatively low homicide rate and those type of things. I want to be very clear. Any homicide is a tragedy. And if we quote unquote only had 3, I don't want to come across as being disrespectful to the folks who lost their lives, because 3 is 3 too many. That number needs to be at 0. So I just wanted to put that out there that these numbers are actually people that have been victimized, and I want to make sure that they're properly respected as we go through these statistics. But in 2021, we did have 3 homicides, and as you can see, our homicide rate has pretty much held steady over the years. We've had as low as 1. I can't remember a time where we've had 0 in the city, but we're usually around 2 or 3 per year. So that has held steady over the course of the last 5 years. Serious assaults and attempted homicide, there's a disturbing trend upward. In 2020, we had 92, and in 2021, we had 108. So all 3 homicides last year, each were resolved by arrest, meaning we didn't have any unsolved homicides in our city last year. Next slide. Well, here's some good news in regards to robbery. As you can see, the trend has been downward over the last couple of years and really held steady from 2020 to 2021. And due to a lot of hard work by our officers and detectives, the key here is quick response through investigation and subsequent apprehension, and collaboration with outside agencies that share regional suspect information, which has been a key for us to identify the folks who are having the most harm to our community and then being responsive to that. So as you all might know, is Fremont has a reputation that if someone comes into our community and causes harm, we will track them and follow up with them no matter where they are. If they're in Southern California, if they're in Utah, Arizona, if we have leads to go and apprehend that individual, we will do just that. Next slide. So residential burglaries or burglaries in overall have been trending down over the last couple of years. You can see specifically in residential burglaries, we had 261 in 2021, and then we had 305 in 2020. So that trend is headed in the right direction. And it's important to understand that we are down significantly in residential burglaries year over year for the past decade. And it was because of the leadership of the past and a lot of hard work by our crime analysis unit that we've enjoyed those decreases. Now you will see in commercial burglary in 2020, we had a spike from 2019 to 2020 to 673. In 2021, that is trending down. Now, why? Well, we suspect that it is in large part because of COVID. We know that a lot of businesses allow their workers to work remotely, which we know commercial burglaries are crimes of opportunity. So because we had no one at these businesses, then the criminals took full advantage of that. In 2021, we started having people go back to work, and that commercial burglary rate went down. So we do think it's COVID had an impact on that on both ways, people going back to work and then people working remote. And then vehicle burglaries as well has been trending down. You can see that we had about 300 less vehicle burglaries in 2021 as compared to 2020. Some of the strategies that we use are high visibility patrols as a deterrent to identify hotspots. We focus on repeat offenders. We know that there's a small group of individuals that repeatedly cause the most harm to our community. So we focus on them. And then we use technology as well to help supplement the personnel that we have to follow up with these crimes. Next slide. Auto theft. Many repeat offenders here. The focus again on technology and automatic license plate readers. So the thing that I'm really pleased with our community is that we embrace technology as a tool to help mitigate crime in our city. But auto theft, we did see a slight increase from 2020 to 2021. Not a large increase, but there was definitely a huge increase, an increase. The big increase was from 2019 to 2020. Now that was a significant increase there. And so crimes of opportunity, we think that, some changes in the penalties associated with some of these crimes have led to this spike. I do believe that the criminals oftentimes feel like there's not going to be much accountability when it comes to auto theft. And so that has really given them the confidence that they can get away with these type of crimes. We still investigate, we still take it seriously. We just need to ensure that folks are held accountable, but we have to adjust to the laws that are in front of us. Next slide. Grand theft, as you can see, had a significant increase year over year. Now, this increase, we think, is as a result of the money criminals can make on catalytic converter thefts. And I know that you all are familiar with catalytic converter thefts, but we average about 67 of these thefts per month, which is a lot for this type of community. It's a regional and national problem. We have to continue to work with our regional partners to try to mitigate the impact of these thefts. And we do just that. We have a few investigations that are ongoing right now, and we focus on the secondhand dealers and recyclers to try to hold them accountable as well. Next slide. Okay, sideshow activity is another issue that has been of concern for our community. You can see in 2020, we had our highest level at 139. Now, it's important to understand that we just started tracking really consistently sideshow activity over the last couple of years. So we definitely started tracking it more consistently in 2020, and that may have caused that spike that you see there. But we partnered with our traffic team and patrol teams and regional partners to really have more of a regional response to this issue, because by its nature, sideshow activity is highly mobile. So they will start in Oakland or San Leandro or Union City, and then they will make their way south or north, and sometimes they will end up in Fremont. And so we need to have those regional partners to communicate that these type of incidents are headed our way, and then we can kind of head it off before it gets out of control. So we hopefully in 2022, we can reduce that number even further and make an impact. There is some legislation being proposed now to enhance the penalties of folks that are participating in this illegal activity. So hopefully those laws will go through. Next slide. All right, so homeless disturbance calls for service and 5150 reports. And if you're not familiar with what a 5150 report is, that's someone that is suffering from a mental illness, and they're a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or they're gravely disabled. So homeless disturbance calls. You can see we've held pretty steady over the last couple of years. We've actually had a little bit of a downward trend. In 2019, we had 3,500 or so of these calls. In 2020, it went down to 32, 65, and then a little bit of a reduction in 2021. So you might see in 2018, it was really, really low, but we would caution you there, that statistic is problematic because we started tracking these types of calls midway through the year. So if we were tracking the entire year, then obviously I think that number would be consistent with what you see in the 3,000 range. So we have about 9 homeless related calls per day for 2020, 2021. That's on average. So in a 24-hour period. So that does create, we have to deploy resources to those particular calls throughout the day. So it is an issue that we try to mitigate and respond to. 5150 calls, as you can see, there is a downward trend there. We used to go to a lot of calls, over 800 in 2017, with people that were suffering for some sort of mental episode in which the police were called. Our mobile evaluation team, we think, has had a huge benefit to this community and reduce those number of calls. As you know, that our mental health evaluation, our MET team, is comprised of highly trained, highly skilled police officers and clinicians that are trained to respond to and follow up with and provide services to those suffering from mental illness in our community. So we view this program as a success and a direct benefit to our community. Next slide. Okay, hate crimes. So this is something that obviously we've dealt with locally and nationally. In New York, the tragedy there was certainly a hate crime, and there's multiple examples throughout the nation. This is something that we will devote any and every available resource to follow up on these type of incidents because of the significant impact that it has to our community. There is a difference between hate crime and hate incident, and a hate crime is a crime against a person, group, or property motivated by the victim's real or perceived protected social group, a disability, gender, nationality, race, those type of things. So hate crimes are serious crimes that may result in imprisonment or jail time. So a hate incident is an action or behavior motivated by hate, but which for one or more reasons is not a crime. So name calling, for instance, is despicable, it's hurtful, but it may not necessarily be a crime because of freedom of speech and those type of things. Displaying hate material on someone's own property also is not in and of itself a crime. Posting hate material, distributing those materials may not be a hate crime. So that doesn't mean that they don't have a significant impact to our community, because they do. I myself was a victim of a hate incident on one of these Zoom calls at a district meeting, where there were some hateful comments directed towards me as an African American. But it didn't rise to the level of a crime, but it still had an impact, right? So I don't want to, suggest that a hate incident is not serious. So of the hate crimes that we had, 3 were anti-religion and 4 were anti-race. So we had 7 in 2021, which is up from 2020 and 2019, right? So we've held steady between 4 and 6 for the last couple of years, but we did see a few additional hate crimes in 2021. Next slide. Okay, and now we have the we're fortunate to have Manager Joanna Canaday, who oversees our crime analysis unit, that's going to go through some specific data for District 4. So we reached out to your council member and we wanted to get some specifics on what are some of the concerns within your district. And then we want to provide you with district specific data that you may be concerned with. Now, it's important to understand that the districts were realigned recently. So some of the data that we're going to talk about may not have applied in this particular district 5 or 6 months ago. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through this information, because those boundaries did recently change. So with that, Manager Canaday, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good evening, District 4. I'm happy to be here to try to explain a bit of detail of the activity in your district. So I'll start by explaining just what you see on this canvas in front of you. To the left are crime stats from this past year of 2021 compared to 2020. And these are what my team and the department deems priority crimes. These are crimes that we, analyze on a daily, weekly basis, try to develop strategies to mitigate these crimes with an emphasis on prevention, disruption, and apprehension. So these crime types we are always seeking to bring down. In the middle, you see what is pretty much a standard, typical crime analysis heat map. This is your district and some of the boundary beyond up to Vargas Road, but there's virtually no activity. So we just zoomed in on the central Fremont area of your district. And then to the far right are top 10 reports. So these aren't necessarily crimes, and some of these have overlap, for example, theft and mail theft. However, this is what was reported the most in your district last year. So just to walk you through, and to emphasize, in the center map, the red activity, again, we call this a heat map, and this illustrates volume of reports. The red is not necessarily crime, it's reports taken. And we take so many reports that are not criminal in nature, varying from miscellaneous public service, found property, lost property, crime, of course, suspicious circumstances, 5150, drugs, property, etc. So it runs the whole range of any substantial or meaningful contact that we have with the community. So that's what the red is, and it just kind of shows us where activity is concentrated in your district. So to the left, with some crime stats, you'll see there was a homicide last year, which was solved, as the chief indicated. That homicide has been resolved. The robbery has decreased from 35 to 27, and that robbery stat includes, street robberies of stolen cell phones, forceful shoplifting at Safeway, which we call an Estes robbery, carjackings. We had one home invasion, and just again, what we consider basic street robberies. So it includes all types of robbery in that count of 27 for the year. Residential burglary had a nice decrease of 39%, and that includes burglaries from garages. So it's entering homes and garages. Commercial burglaries, another drop, down 22%. Auto burglary, another nice decrease. Auto theft, down slightly. And then I would just like to note with grand theft, as the chief explained, the trend of catalytic converters, the theft of catalytic converters. Unfortunately, we have seen just a shocking, amount of these as the region and the country has. And we have had repeat victims, which, we understand that it can be burdensome and frustrating. In your district, of those 194 grand thefts, I would approximate 115 of those were catalytic converter thefts. And then petty mail theft, slight increase. That was another trend throughout COVID. Unfortunately, I'm sure, a few of you may have been victimized with identity theft, maybe stolen from personal information out of your mail. And so that makes up, I would say that probably is the increase there, just the trend of stealing mail for personal information or benefits, debit cards that had benefits, stimulus checks over the last year or so. Then a slight increase in vandalism and overall police reports. Again, that's nothing to be concerned of. Reports are just documents, documenting contacts, and other activity, as I explained a bit earlier with the red. Now, calls for service, I'd like to explain, there's a 9% increase. There were 25,000 in your district last year. I believe the city overall had about 102,000, 106,000 last year. So you had a fair portion of that. Now, please know that all calls for service are not necessarily dispatched for a police response. Some callers that call in to our emergency or non-emergency line are referred to our online reporting system because it's a cold crime, a minor crime with no suspect information, et cetera. So they are referred to our online reporting system. And then some are just completely non-criminal and require no police response. And those would include, private tows, wireless 911 disconnects, and a variety of calls that don't require police response. As the chief explained, 415H is a homeless disturbance call. Your homeless disturbance calls decreased by 10% last year from the year prior. And then proactive calls for service. This is a pretty incredible stat of 83% increase. What proactive calls for service is that total is a combination of 3 different call types of our officers. That is ILP, which stands for Intelligence-Led Policing, which is proactive patrols saturating areas where the analysis has identified fluctuations, increases in crime. And so we want to be present to deter that activity. So it's ILP for that proactivity. TSAT is traffic saturation. And that's when our units go to areas that are either known for collisions or responding to traffic complaints from our community. A lot of the TSAT is centered around schools, making sure, the community are abiding by safety rules, keeping their speeds down, yielding to crosswalks, et cetera. And then the last call type is just, it is proactive traffic, security checks, et cetera. So a really nice increase there in your area. And again, the top 10 reports, those numbers may not be equivalent to the ones on the left because the left are the crimes which are a combination of certain theft types, whereas top 10 reports, all of it is not even criminal, such as suspicious circumstance, miscellaneous public service, and 5150. And that is all I have for you, Chief.
Thank you, Manager Candidate. So we'll move into other concerns specific to the district. Obviously, homelessness, and it is a concern. We, having communications with your council member made it very clear that this is a concern within this district. Citywide, we've had 3,208 homeless-related calls. And in your district, we had 951, which were 30% of the calls, which is 10%. It's down 10% from 2020. The Housing Navigation Center, which is at City Hall, we had 6 reports total in 2021 and 39 calls for service. So we don't have a lot of reports and a lot of calls for service coming out of the Housing Navigation Center. As you can see, the bulk of our calls have to do with individuals that are not in these facilities and that are on the street, or disrupting a business, or in traffic, or near a school, and those type of things. So we do utilize our MET team, which, like I said before, is a specialized collaborative team providing outreach to bridge service for homelessness and those in mental health crisis. It's important to understand that homelessness in and of itself is not a crime, right? But homeless individuals can commit crimes, and that's when we get involved. So the police department is not the resource to solve our homeless problem. We're the available resource because we work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we're not going to rest ourselves out of this issue, and just moving the problem around from location to location or district to district doesn't do us any good as well, because as the police chief, I have a responsibility for the safety and security of the entire city. And so it is a complex issue. We are doing our part. I am trying to make some adjustments with our staffing to be more supportive and more responsive to some of these calls. So, because we realize that there is a frustration in our community. But it is going to take a combination of ensuring that we are doing all we can to deconflict those who are living on the street with those trying to enjoy basic services throughout our city. So we have to work with human services and other service providers throughout the city. And that includes, having some facilities throughout the city that are designed to house some of these individuals on a temporary basis. And so that's what I mean by we are supportive of projects and housing options for individuals, because again, as you can see, the bulk of our calls for service have to do with individuals who are not in these facilities, and they cause the most impact to our community. We will be sharing a document that has more specifics on crime and data associated to individuals that are unhoused or homeless. I know we've been working on that for several months. I know that there may be individuals out there that are eagerly awaiting that information, but we had old data from 2019, and we wanted to ensure that we waited for what's called the point in time count that had happened in February to get a more updated count of how many individuals we have that are homeless in our city. And so I'll just share a few of those statistics with you right now. So I think we had, we did have in 2019, when the last point in time count occurred, we had 608 total homeless individuals that were counted. And so 123 of those were sheltered, which means they were in some sort of facility and getting service. And then 485 of those were unsheltered. So those are the folks that are, living on the street in a tent, in a vehicle or something like that. So in 2020, in February, like I said, another point in time count occurred, and we had 1,026 that were counted. Obviously, that's a significant increase. And we had, of that, 160 were sheltered, and then we had 866 that were unsheltered. So the problem has gotten worse. It's also important to understand that that count is fundamentally flawed, because we can't count all the individuals in the city in 90 square miles, approximately, all the folks that are unhoused. We go to known locations. So we estimate that that count is probably double or triple the amount that we actually count. And we try to factor in that as well. So it's important to have that context as we start to go through and we start to produce that document for the community. But we wanted to have that point in time count to put with the data to give you the most accurate information that we can, so you can make your own assessment. So I'm hopeful, again, that that information will come out in the coming days, and we're trying to finalize that fact sheet, because I know that it's important to all of you, and we'll get that out as soon as we can. The next slide. Okay, this is just a slide dedicated to how to stay connected with us. We do appreciate feedback. Again, it's important for me as a chief to hear from you, to hear your perspectives. I know this particular presentation was not dedicated to homelessness and the Home Key project. I think there's going to be other opportunities for the community to weigh in on that particular project, but I know it's a priority for you all. And so it's important for me to hear from you as I make adjustments in the organization to be responsive to your concerns. The next slide. And I think with that, we have time for some questions.
All right, Chief. The first question I have on here is question on crime stats. On the PD's website, the classification of crime seems to differ from report to report, which makes comparisons a little difficult. For instance, the 2021 annual reports we're seeing tonight in tonight's shows serious assaults, attempted homicides, and robberies, with the robberies being somewhat more numerous than the serious assaults. But the 5-year comparison from 2017 to 2021 report shows aggravated assaults that are higher than robberies, and the weekly blotter shows robberies but no figures for serious or aggravated assaults at all. Do individual cases get multiple classifications under different classification systems? Is there a way to download these in a consistent form that allows comparison and analysis across the cases and years?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And, you know, we're fortunate to have manager candidate here that I'm going to turn it over to talk a little bit more about our crime stats and how that information is gathered. Joanna?
Sure. Well, thank you for paying attention to all of the information we're publishing. As far as, so one clarification, because we really try to stay on top of the crime environment, the true crime picture of Fremont week to week, as it affects, it impacts our deployments, our investigative priorities, et cetera. We are analyzing crime stats every week. However, our department reports through DOJ to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program on a monthly basis. And that program, which has been in operation for decades, and most police agencies contribute their statistical reports to, they actually have different standards and different classifications for particular crimes. So our California penal codes represent certain crime definitions. The FBI Uniform Crime Reporting has different definitions. So the statistics that we review internally never exactly match what we're reporting to DOJ. And it's not a discrepancy, a flaw, or a problem. It's just two different ways of defining crime types. So that explains the 5-year report you see on our website. That is Uniform Crime Reporting. It's very general. If you see our weekly analysis, what we're reviewing internally with our officers, detectives, et cetera, it's very granular. It's multiple types of robberies, et cetera. To your other question, unfortunately, we do not have a way for you to, download all of our crime reports, crime types, and do your own analysis. We do feature on our website. It's a platform known as City Protect that is part of our Fremont Police Department website, where you can query a crime map, to see crime in your area. I hope that covered your questions.
Okay, the next question that we have here is, I'm surprised that homelessness related calls are down considering the homelessness is up. What does the chief attribute to the decrease?
Yeah, so some of it has to do with COVID and really making a better assessment on what type of response we're going to have, right? So there's two things at play here. One, there were some directives and laws that were put into place during COVID that really suggested that, hey, if individuals that are unhoused are not causing any issues, we should actually allow them to be there to stop the spread of COVID. And so going into these encampments and interacting and those type of things, really we had to use our discretion on that and balance the impact that these individuals were having, the negative impact that these individuals are having on our community, and trying to assess that. The other thing is, I just think that with businesses that were closed or not operable, we just had less people that were around businesses in some areas that are typically impacted by those who are unhoused. So our call probably for service dropped as a result of that as well. So there probably were several factors associated with that, but mainly they seem to all point back to COVID in one way or the other, which probably attributed to the decrease in calls.
Okay. How many resources of what types have been added to FPD towards homeless calls for service?
Yeah, so we have our MET team. Our MET team is responsible not only for the mental aspect of our community members, but also they respond to homeless calls. One of the things that we've added is another clinician that helps with that. They go out to homeless calls as well. So now we have two clinicians that are funded here in the city, and then we have one from Washington Hospital that helps out as well. She's here full time. We have two police officers and a sergeant, and that's the team that's dedicated to deal with the homeless issue, partnering with Human Services, who has their own team of individuals that respond as well. Now, the other thing that we've done internally is I've asked my street team, our street enforcement team, to supplement the actions and the follow-up from our MET team. So this team will go, and if there's an abatement or we need to, there's criminal activity associated with an encampment, then we have this team prepared and ready to go to supplement that team and work closely with them to try to mitigate the impacts of that particular issue. Because again, homeless individuals are people just like those who have homes, and sometimes they do commit crimes, and they're going to be held responsible and held accountable just like anyone who is housed. So we have to have those teams to support that as well. So those are the changes internally that we made in 2021 that directly, we think, benefit our community.
Instead of waiting until mid-2023 to see the crime trends for 2022, can Fremont residents see preliminary year-to-date trends for 2022?
Yeah, well, I'll defer to Joanna again, because I think that we need to wait a certain amount of time before maybe the data is ready for the previous year. So Joanna, can you explain that a little bit?
Sure, Chief. I think there's 2 points to that. For one, defining a true crime trend definitely takes time. Assessing, we work hard to make an effort to evaluate our efforts. So when we make recommendations for patrol teams to saturate a crime area over an extended period of time, it's important that we look at the actions taken and what kind of results there were, because we want to evaluate, are our efforts making a difference? I think with COVID, crime trends became extremely apparent You know, unfortunately, again, some of you may have lost laptops out of your cars going to Starbucks. That was easy pickings for criminals. COVID, people weren't driving around with their laptops anymore. That crime dropped significantly. It takes time to see trends. And then the other aspect of that is, I'm sure it's hard to believe in our time of technology, but the analysis really does take time, because there's not a button that just produces everything. It's very nuanced. A lot of the data needs cleaning up, massaging, you know, names are misspelled or addresses, and we need to correct those. And it just takes a lot of work to put that information together. So again, I'm glad you're very interested in it, and we can work on delivering things publicly sooner, but they do take some time.
All right, I think we have time for about 2 more questions from the chat. Here's one right here. Any plan on setting up a drug investigative unit to crack down drug dealing problem in the city? If no, why? If yes, when?
Yes, we already have that resource in place. We have a major crimes task force. It's a regional task force that involves some state officials and some local surrounding agencies that we have in place. So if there's a complaint or known activity, we ask that you communicate that to us through our website or a phone call to our non-emergency number, obviously, unless there's an emergency associated with it. And we will take that information and follow up as we can with those type of issues.
Okay. Violent crime and property crime ranked high in the residents' survey. What efforts are being taken to prevent property crimes?
Yes, well, great question. So we have made a series of adjustments in our staffing. So like I mentioned early on, the challenge in hiring police officers right now is significant. Fremont, as well as all agencies throughout the region, are experiencing this. So we have what we have. We can't, we can only try to attract qualified applicants and recruit. But at the end of the day, the resources that I have today, I have to make adjustments responsive to the community's concerns, as you suggested. So we redeployed what we typically had was a fraud detective, and they are now responsible for retail crime. And we know that retail crime is huge, right, throughout the region. So we're going to have someone specifically assigned to monitor retail crime in our community. We also have a very good relationship with our businesses. And so we work closely with our businesses, and we've recently had the opportunity to talk directly to our Attorney General to give him some perspective of what we're dealing with here in Fremont and regionally as far as thefts. The other thing that we've done is we've shifted some resources throughout the department. So I've had to make some very difficult decisions with the limited amount of resources that we have. And I've had to take resources from other units and try to redeploy those units, those resources into our investigations unit to make sure that they have appropriate staffing to be responsive to these crimes. We know that if we can identify certain individuals who are responsible for the majority of the crime in our city, it makes a big difference. Fremont is still a relatively safe city for its size, but I want the crime rate to be 0. So we always have work to do, no matter what it is. And so whether it's violent crime or property crime, those have been listed as 2 of the main priorities of our community. And I have talked to my staff about that, and we have done everything we can to be supportive and responsive to those concerns.
And then probably our last question, Chief, can you elaborate as to why the format was changed in our district meetings?
Yes, so I think, and Monica, you might be able to jump in as well. So that meeting that I spoke about where that hateful speech was directed towards me and others in our community, We were the victims of what's called a Zoom bomb, which I had never heard of. My IT, my staff had all heard of it, but I had never heard of it. So we had to change that up for a little bit more security in order to ensure that there wasn't a disruption to the meeting. Now, I prefer in-person meetings. In fact, I think the next time we do this, we're going to try to find a way to have these in person, you know, whether they're outdoors, but we have to make sure they're safe, because I do appreciate the one-on-one interaction. And we started the series of community meetings. I think our first one was back in December. So in December, we started Zoom because in December, right, that was right when Omicron variant was starting to ramp up and we couldn't go back in person. So we've completed the series of virtual meetings, and it is my hope that we can get back in person and have that one-on-one interaction, which I think is so valuable. So I don't know if Monica or anyone else has anything to add, but that was the reason.
It was definitely to prevent any more additional disruptions, anybody being offended by the context that was happening during our meetings. And we definitely want you guys to get the best information and the experience. I know this is a little bit challenging typing questions, but we do definitely want to share the information the best that we can seamlessly. Chief, do you want to close up?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank everyone once again for this opportunity. It is extremely valuable. I'm in constant conversation and communication with your council member, who is constantly communicating the priorities of not only his district, but the community members throughout our city, which I appreciate because, like I said, it helps me develop strategies specific to the concerns of our community. So I just appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the questions, and I look forward to meeting as many of you as I can in the coming months in person and get more perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to the council member once again for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chief Washington, and thank you, Joanna and Monica, for working tirelessly behind the scene. As I can see, Monica is typing the answers as the meeting was going on. So I wish we could have a longer meeting. We wish we could meet in person, in general. But once again, we have channels open for our communication, and Chief Washington already shared some of those channels. And as you know, I am also willing to conduct different forms of communication, meetings or gatherings, or this type of communications with all of you. And for some people, they want very detailed information, and you can always send email to me, then I can forward to the staff. But if you have some concerns in general, you're also welcome to send me emails or leave me a voicemail so that, if I can address some of the concerns you have personally, I will. Otherwise, I would forward to staff and then follow up. But once again, I appreciate all the efforts made by the City of Fremont, Fremont Police Department, as well as even some of the community members, for having this successful meeting. Is that going to be the last one that we're going to have? Definitely not. I hope next one will be in person and in the very near future. So keep posted for the future events. And thank you very much, and good night.
Good night, everyone.